So last week what we did was start our look here in Genesis 3 and 4. What did sin do to these 7 wonderful things about God's creation? And it was a doozy, wasn't it? It went from being very good, everything being very good, to at least a lot of things. The cynical among us will say everything, but that's probably not quite true. But a lot of things became very, you fill in the blank with whatever negative word you come up with. It went from being very good to being a mess. Amen? Does anyone want to argue that point this morning? No, things are perfect everywhere. No way. Like, turn on the news, open the newspaper. Wherever you get your news, take a look. Just around the water cooler at work, does it take all that long to get to the bad news? Why? Because of sin. And that may sound like a very simplified, churchy answer, but who's got a better answer? That's at the heart of it all. The heart of us is the problem, right? Life was the rule in God's creation. Suddenly death is the rule. Paul says death reigns now. That stinks. Thanks, sin. And then the very personal, present God, he's still personal and present, but what's the problem? We're afraid of him and we hide from him. That's because of sin. What a stinker. And then community was a part of the creation. It was always meant to be at the center of creation. We're supposed to have deep, intimate, and satisfying fellowship with each other. But what happens because of sin? We're afraid of each other and we hide from each other. What a miserable situation, right? We're alone, we're isolated, we're afraid. Now, that doesn't mean that fellowship and deep fellowship isn't possible. It just means it's not the rule. And you know this. So many of you know this in your life. You have struggled to find deep, satisfying community and relationship with people. And you say it was always their fault. They don't want it. Well, let's be honest. I haven't really gone through the steps required either, right? I'm trying to keep myself safe while having genuine relationship. What's the problem? You need to risk some things. Isn't that true? To have deep, satisfying connections with people, you've got to take risks. But we would rather have risk-free, and it never works. And so all of our fear keeps us hidden from each other. We could talk about psychology and sociology and all the studies we want, but it always boils down to that simple thing. Sin produces fear of each other and God, and so we withdraw. Now, after that cherry look, we're going to end our time in the good news, don't worry, but we have to keep going down into the dark valley before we can appreciate the warmth of the sunlight, of the good news of Jesus. So let's continue on our list here, because the 5th thing on the list of the 7 is that God created everything for blessing. And what do we find out when we read the story? Well, let's go to the story together. Let's read. Now, I'm going to pick up the reading in Genesis 3. I'm going to jump to verse 8. And I know it's not good news, but let's deal with it. Then the man and his wife, that's Adam and Eve, heard the sound of Yahweh God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they squealed with delight and ran to him. Is that what you see in your Bible? No. And they hid from Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. But Yahweh God called to the man, "Where are you?" And he answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then Yahweh God said to the woman, "What is this you've done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate it." So Yahweh God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring, your seed, and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." To the woman he said, now, feel free to groan, ladies, as I read this. Feel free to experience the realities, because this is no joke, is it? "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you'll give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." To Adam he said, and amen, feel free. Come on, this is a situation. This is our story. "Because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you'll eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you'll eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you'll eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. Verse 21, Yahweh God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And Yahweh God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Did you hear that pronouncement? He must not live forever. So Yahweh God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he'd been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim, mighty angels, and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Amen. Please be seated. And as I said before, go into chapter 4, what do you find out? Cain and Abel are two of the first children Adam and Eve have together as they're kicked out of the garden. They're growing up outside the garden. They now have the stain of sin in them because of mom and dad. And it gets so bad so fast that two of the first human beings on earth face each other and one kills the other. A brother kills a brother for doing the right thing. That's the sickness of sin. That's how quickly it grows in us, not only as individuals but as a race. I mean, this is sin, everybody. This is serious business. So think with me. God creates human beings, and he had done this earlier with the animals. He creates us, and the first thing he wants to do is what? Bless us, right? That's what it says. He blessed them. And then he told them to reproduce a whole lot for community, and then he said, rule. Have dominion. Subdue this earth. Now, what happens because of sin? And it happens pretty darn quick, doesn't it? As soon as God finds out about it, what blessing turns to what? Now, cursing, just like blessing, we've kind of lost track of what that is. We think of cursing now as saying inappropriate words. Curse words. Ooh, what'd you just say? Mommy, he cursed. You know, we use the curse, that word curse, for the wrong thing. You can use other words like expletives or profanity for that, okay? Let's reserve the word cursing for what it actually is. You're calling, now from a human point of view, you're calling on the spirits or the gods or God to bring harm or negative result on another person. That's a curse. Now when God himself does it, wow. Remember, blessing and cursing actually have power and effect in the world. They're not just words, right? Because the words go to a power source beyond yourself to bring about an effect. Now, God is the power source. So when he brings a curse on you, does it happen? Oh, in spades it happens. It's so bad. Now, I'm not saying God was bad for doing it. I'm saying the results are terrible. Now, it's hard to sympathize with the serpent. Am I right? Like when the serpent gets cursed, you're like, yeah, jerk. Slither. And let's face it, in the world, snakes still have a bad rap. Even if you've never heard this story and you never understood the whole idea of the serpent becoming cursed, isn't it true people in general just really don't like snakes? It's not just Indiana Jones. I mean, he represents us. Now, some people enjoy them. They have pets. They wrap themselves around your body, and it's all cute. But most people understand there's not a love thing going on here between humans and serpents. Now, to most people, that's not an important part of life. Okay, let's move on. Look at the woman's curse now. Now, again, this is something that really happens. We feel this every single day all around the world. And I just want you to know what God is referring to here in childbearing and labor is not just the process of giving birth. In the Hebrew, it's the entire process of pregnancy, of conception, the whole pregnancy, and then the giving birth, and then the raising of children is actually also suggested here. Now, ladies, I guess we could take a poll if we really wanted to, but have you found that this curse is still in force? I could get a loud amen for that one. Am I right? Even with modern medicine, scientific advances, and all of that, it's still unpleasant. But listen, lest we forget, and some in this church house today can testify better than I can, until very recently, becoming pregnant could be a very dangerous situation. Actually, it's still true in some circumstances. But like worldwide, it was understood, if you're pregnant, this could turn very bad very fast. A lot of people died. A lot of people had terrible problems in the whole process of pregnancy. And then I find out, this is all just to verify that what we read is true, unless the smart people I was reading were just totally wrong. Apparently humans have it worse than any other created being when it comes to this whole pregnancy and giving birth process. The most discomfort, the most pain. Now, of course, other creatures can die in the process and stuff. That happens. But when it comes to the discomfort, the pain, all of that, for some reason, gee, I wonder what it is, human beings are the creature of all creatures that have the worst time with this. And let's be more specific, women. Like, I'm not going to pretend like it affects me as much as it does you, ladies. So, do you see how powerfully true this is? Now, we modern, sophisticated folks have one of two options at this point. We can either conclude that human beings experienced this terrible thing women did, and so later on we wrote it into the story to try to explain why. You know, just like the Greeks came up with the god Helios to explain why there's a big ball of light in the sky or something. It already happened, we just tried to make up a reason for it. Or, what's the other option? We realize that what we're experiencing day in and day out actually is happening because of what we're reading here. You have to decide what you're going to do with that. To me, it's very obvious and plain. With all the other evidence before us, what we're reading is the actual explanation. Is that intense or what? You can understand some stuff about this world because God shows us what it is. Now, I wanted to just make this one point really quickly because it highlights the goodness of our Father, of our Maker. Notice that when God blessed us, He told us to recreate, to have more children, have other people arrive on the planet for community. When the curse comes, He does not undo it by saying, you know what, never mind, you can't have any kids, it's just you two, you're going to die. Now, think about that. He told them the day, and that's the literal, the day you eat of that fruit, you'll die. That's what He told them. Did they die that day? No. They lived hundreds of years, and we're still like, what is that about? But they did. They lived hundreds of years after they ate from the fruit. You think, oh, well, did He lie? Like, what's the deal? This is the kindness and generosity of Father. He knew that if they died that day, there goes the human race. It's over. They can't have any kids. So what He decides to do, and I don't fully grasp why, He's so good, He decides to bring about the death of some animal, use the skin of that animal, and clothe these people. Death happened that day. It just wasn't them. Whoa. Would they die eventually? Hundreds of years later, but yeah. They couldn't go get that fruit from the tree that would let them live forever. Do you remember that? He said they can't. We can't let that happen. But they would die later. But they got to live a long time. And do you know what they were doing while they were alive for hundreds of years? Having a bunch of kids. So the curse does not stop the blessing process. What it does is it makes it a lot harder. And again, the amens from the ladies. So think about the kindness of your Father. He is allowing this race of humans who have done such a horrible thing and continue to do horrible things. He doesn't say, I'm done with you, no more babies anywhere. Couldn't He do that? He can pull that lever. He doesn't. He lets us continue to make more little people, knowing that those little people just might grow up to be a devastating effect in His world. How kind and gracious He is. Remember that God has all the options on the table possible. He keeps making these decisions. This isn't just happening by accident. God allowed this to happen, but He did make it harder. And you're thinking, if you're thinking like me, ladies, you're thinking, why do I have to suffer for what that woman did? You know? Why do I have to suffer to have babies just because that lady did that? Well, this is where we have to be sober-minded. Think carefully. Is she the only one that has done such things? Is she the only one who listened to the lie instead of the truth? Is she the only one who trusted the enemy instead of the Father? Is she the only one? No. And I'm not saying that your pain in childbirth is directly a result of that thing you did when you were 10. That's not the point. It's just that it's a human thing, not just an Eve thing. And so we're suffering because of sin. It's inevitable. Now, gentlemen, let's take a quick look at this because I don't have time to go into the fullness of this, but think about it. What does God say is cursed in verse 17? He didn't say, cursed are you. What did he say? Cursed is the ground because of you. Now, would that kind of boomerang around and hit the man and get him problems? Yeah, because what is the ground going to be? Who's the ground going to be worked by? That guy. So the curse does negatively affect the man, but the curse is not on the man. It's on the ground. We're going to come back to this at the end here, but think about this. Man was given charge over the earth, yes? And so when he blows it, what was cursed? The earth. That's rotten. I wanted you to turn to Romans 8 with me because this is a pretty intense point that Paul makes. Turn to Romans 8 and his verses 18 to 22. I want you to know that it was significant when mankind sinned, beyond the consequences to mankind. So come with me to Romans 8, verse 18. I'm going to read through verse 22. Try to soak this in, because again, a lot of people think the Bible is just religious fluff, but this is explaining some things that are things we experience every day. Paul wrote, I consider that our present sufferings aren't worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Oh man, you got to take that home and eat that one. Just chew on it, savor it. That's so good. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. The creation's waiting for something? I wonder why. Verse 20. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it. Do you see this? Creation was not guilty of that sin, but creation got the sock to the stomach anyway. Isn't that unfair? Isn't that terrible? We did this to this world. All right, that stinks. But what was the hope attached to that frustration? In hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. That's where this is all headed. That's the new creation. So don't forget that. It's a dim picture as we talk about Genesis 3 and 4, but Paul will not let us forget. It's in a terrible state right now because of us, but creation is not stuck there. Just like none of us are stuck where we are. There is a forward motion that God has always been up to get his creation back to its freedom he meant it to have. Oh, now look at verse 22. We know that the whole creation has been, what's that word there? Groaning. As in the pains of childbirth. Isn't that an interesting reference to the curse? Isn't that interesting? Women are cursed with the pain of childbirth. And then Paul says, and man's curse on the ground is kind of like the same thing for creation. Dang. Right up to the present time. So this is what the curse does. It takes that which is blessed and it brings it to the curse. That's what sin's effect is on the creation. But that seems all very much distant in the past. Let me just really quickly make sure we're aware of this. You, every day you live, are called and tempted by the world and sin to see the curse in things. Now, we think it's just natural disposition. Some people are optimistic and uppity, and other people are a little bit of half-empty, pessimistic, kind of that grumpy thing, right? It's just how I am. It's how I'm wired. But listen, there's something fundamentally spiritual, and I'm not calling out those who are, struggle with that. What I'm saying is, when you realize how true all these things are we're looking at in Genesis, we can either have a cursed disposition or a blessed disposition, which is to say, where is our focus? What is the reality we're living in? And if you're a part of Jesus' kingdom, where the new creation is real and going on all the time and going to be finally culminated when he returns, are you under the curse or under the blessing? What was that? A couple of us know. Come on, y'all. You have to live in the curse's repercussions, I'm afraid. It's just the way it is. We're in this mortal, fallen world. But you are not defined by the curse. You are not stuck in it. You are just having to experience it for a bit. My question is, do you live a life, do you have a mindset that is so convinced that Jesus is right about his kingdom that you know he's right when he says, even if you are poor in spirit, you're blessed? Even when you're hungry for righteousness, because you don't have it, you're blessed. Because you're going to be filled up. Even when you're mourning in this old, polluted, created order, you're blessed. Why? Because God has promised comfort to you. Do you really believe you're a blessed person? Or are you carrying around on your back the reality of the curse that belongs to the old order? This is a real question, everybody. And you're going to feel the effects of this. Your family will feel the effects of this, however you decide to go with that. Now, it's also true that you can't just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be chipper. Because sometimes, listen, this is important. Sometimes we've been shaped over the years to be a certain way. And as powerful and as strong as the new creation is, it does take time to be reshaped. So I don't mean to say if you wake up and you don't just decide to feel chipper and everything's solved now because I've decided, that's perfectly natural. Of course, that's how it is. But the question is, are you choosing to train to become the blessed thinking person? Now, of course, I just need to clarify and then I'll move on. I am not somebody who believes that if you just think blessing, you'll get blessing. I'm not name it and claim it kind of weirdness. I'm not talking about the blessings that we crave in our flesh. I'm speaking of kingdom blessing. It's already yours. It's already given. The question is, do you realize that? Because you're going to give off to the world a vibe that's either the curse or the whoa, blessing. And we need to be the kingdom people that tell the world there's blessing. Because they see the curse plenty fine. They don't need us for that. Let's move on to the next one. We were created in God's image. What does sin do? What sin does is it takes the image of God that is already in us. There's no changing that. That's permanently in us as human beings. We've got the image of God in there. We are like him in a lot of ways. Wisdom, free will, creativity, the whole bit. But what does sin do? It massages into the mix of our being at a fundamental level. It massages in there the enemy's image with it, which stinks because it was an add-on that did not help anything. The fundamental nature of humans is the image of God. What did we add into the mix that really didn't help? The enemy's image. You say, well, why the enemy? I thought it was sin. Sure, but think it through. Who introduced the temptation to fall into sin? The enemy. Who has crafted the world system to be the way it is? The enemy. And he's real. May not feel sophisticated and enlightened to talk about a person named Satan or anything. But look, if it's true, right? You can blame psychology and people's mental weirdness and all that, psychology. But look, that's real too. But there's a person, a conscious being who really does hate God and really hates his beloved. Really. And he's doing everything he can to make sure that the image of God is marred. You can't destroy it. He can't destroy it. He thinks he's all that. But he's got limits. He can't destroy the image of God in you, but he can mar it by leading you into your own dumb choices and mine. Can he do it by himself? No. Come on. But he can do a lot of whispers, can't he? Or his minions. I know he's not omnipresent. Every time something happens, it's not the devil. But listen, he's got a lot of things under his belt that help him in this system. And in 1 John, John tells us that the world is controlled by the evil one. What is he, God? No, we're not talking about he controls weather and stuff. What we mean is the system in the world, the way things operate in our societies and cultures, that's his image. And it's gross. Remember I told you before, Jesus said to his enemies that they were children of the devil? Oh, we're children of Abraham. How dare you? But what was he saying? And he said this, you act just like your dad. You lie, you manipulate, you're arrogant, right? You hypocrites. The image of God is so beautiful and so good. And here's the touch point for your everyday existence and life in this world. What sin will do to you personally is blind you to the reality that you and others are made in God's image. Now think this through. The only reason you do things with your own body, with your own self, and to others that is damaging and degrading is because you are blind to how wonderfully and beautifully you've been created in God's image. If we were aware, I think, of how gloriously we've been created in God's image, we would not dare do the things we do to ourselves and each other. We wouldn't. You can talk about any category of sin you want. Sexual, greed, what else you got? Speaking down to people, gossip, every category you can think of. It comes down to this. I view you as less than you really are. Or I view myself as less than I really am. Now here's what's insidious about sin. It makes me think more of myself than I really am, but in reality, I'm seeing myself as less. And you're like, okay, that's double talk, preacher man. But listen, if you saw how gloriously you were made in God's image, you wouldn't think as highly of yourself as you do. What? Because here's what sin does. It makes you the center of your own world, doesn't it? But when you see that you're gloriously made in the image of God, who is suddenly the center now? Oh yeah, he's the center. That's how sin makes you see yourself as less than you are, which somehow leads you to thinking you're more than you are. What a goofy thing sin is. Oh my gosh, there's nothing cutesy about it. It is a destroyer, and it is a manipulator, and it turns us into these crazy people. So here's what I want to encourage you to do as a newly created person under Christ. Will you continually dwell in the reality of the fact that the people around you are made in God's image? Husbands, when you do that with your wives, it will change how you live with your wives. Wives, when you do that with your husbands, it'll change. Now listen, one more snippet of this before I have to move on. When we see other people and ourselves and all that through the lens of being made in God's image, here's what that does. It introduces a third person into the relationship equation. Now this is my experience. Maybe you're better and different than I am. But listen, one of the reasons I am able to be so unkind, to be so unloving to people, is because I see them merely at the level of their connection to me. Here's what I mean. They're my brother, they're my sister, they're my wife, they're my boss, they're my employee, they're my whatever, coworker. And at that level, I can justify how I treat them. Do you see that? Because we have certain expectations, and they have failed in my expectations, so I get to treat them this way. It's only fair. Because they're my brother, they're my wife, they're my blah, they're my blah. And so at that level, if they fail me, it's only fair that I fail them. Isn't that right? And if they're a jerk, I get to be a jerk, because that's this level of their relationship to me, the label of how I know them. Get this, though. When you see them as made in the image of God, there is a third person in the relationship. And I have experienced this in my household as a daddy. I've had this conversation with my kids. You cannot treat your brother or sister that way because they're my child. Are you seeing that? When you treat someone unkindly, unlovingly, you just kind of dismiss them, or whatever you do to them. What you realize when you see there's a third person in the mix is you hear him saying, they may be your brother, your sister, your wife, your whatever, but that is my child. And this is my house. And you do not get to do that to them. Doesn't that change everything? You no longer can justify any of this madness, this unkindness, this dismissal, this degrading. None of it. When you speak that sharp word that cuts someone down, you instantly know through the image of God truth that you're hearing about that, wait a minute, it's not in my power to do that to them. They don't belong to me. Wow. I tell you, the new creation changes it. Sin messed it up, but the new creation brings it back. This is so good. One more thing. I feel like we're just, I can't do it. There's no time. Where you write that down, though? Ephesians 2:1-3. That's how messed up sin made us. That's how deeply sin wove itself into our fabric of being. Check out Ephesians 2:1-3. Oh, it's terrible. Last one. I feel like we're just getting a taste of each of these. Maybe we'll spend more time on them later. Think of this last one with me. When God created us, he created us to rule with him. But remember, he created us to rule in a way that would bring blessing. Because that's what he's all about, isn't it? Blessing in life. So when he entrusted the earth to humans, he expected them to rule in such a way as to bring what? Blessing in life. That's what our rule was meant to do. We're supposed to be good rulers. Benevolent, right? Because of sin, what are we more prone to do? Again, sin makes you the center of your own world. And so if you're in charge of anything, how do you view what you're in charge of in sin? Is a way to get stuff for me. Instead of ruling to bless that which is under my care, I rule it to possess it, to get out of it, to control it. Does this ring a bell for anybody? I'm talking about at the level of parent, at the level of boss, at the level of church leader, world leader. Every level of leadership that you have ever experienced, you have seen examples of people who are not in it to bless those under them, but are in it to possess something, control something, have power. It's most disturbing in situations like in churches. Have you ever experienced a church leader who seizes power for their own selves? Have you ever seen it broadcast on the news? Shaming Christ and his people. Taking advantage of little children with their power to rule. Have you seen it in the higher echelons of national leadership, state leadership? Have you seen that? Bribes and stuff like that? Have you seen it in the household? Listen, parents, this is probably the most fundamental place of leadership every day in and day out for all of us. If you're a parent or any teacher, anyone in authority over young, vulnerable little children, listen, this is where sin is most easily seen. When you treat little children as if they're there for your gain, you have just experienced the power of sin. When you take the lazy route raising your kids instead of the bold and courageous and demanding route of raising your kids the way Jesus would have you do it, you've just experienced the power of sin. It turns leadership inward and self-focused. So think on this, what we just read in Romans 8. What did humans do when they ate from that fruit? Were they thinking of the effect on creation? Nah. They said, that looks good to me. Crunch. Devastation. Now, I as a church leader am very aware of the fact that what Jesus said in Mark 10 is crucial. Let's read this and then I'll have to stop. I'm pretty sure I've gone to my time limit here. And I wanted to dig into each of these so much. I was kind of practicing to the empty seats last night, and I realized this is going to take too long. So I'm kind of doing the shortcut version for some of these just as a taster. Because I want you guys to meditate on this. You know, it's not like I have to say it for you to know it. Like, you can take the truth and chew on it, and the Lord reveals things to you. So I just wanted to kind of give you some taste here. But look at what Jesus said to his apostles. And why this is so important is they were vying for rule and authority over their fellow apostles. Saying, Jesus, let us be the most important in your band when you're the king. So this is his response. He didn't really appreciate that. In verse 42, he said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. And their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your... Do you see it? Ew, that's demeaning. I don't want people to look at me like I'm a servant. I'm too important for that. But notice in Jesus' kingdom economy, if you're super important, what are you doing? You're serving. It's kind of a given that you're important. So stop worrying about that. Stop fighting to be important. You don't have to fight for that. You are important. And once you realize you're important, you know what that frees you to do? Give, serve, relish in it. That your importance is so great that someone else needs your help. Your importance is so great that God gifted you to use a gift to bless his world. Like, stop fighting to be important. It's done. Use your importance to the blessing of another. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be, do you see it? That's even worse word in the NIV, slave of all. That's worse than servant. A servant at least can quit and leave. A slave, nah, you're possessed by someone else. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. What the old creation did was turn me inward so that any rule I have over anything, any influence or authority I have is all for me. As the scriptures say, shepherds feeding only themselves. But what the new creation reality does, through Jesus' truth, is it awakens me to the fact I'm only here to bless some folks. Any influence I have is for blessing. Any power I have is for blessing. So here's where I want to end. I told you I'd end in good news, so let's do it. Maybe about a minute. We've been looking at what the sin did to new creation, or to the creation, right? So end your thought, Valentine's love. End your thought here. What will the new creation do to sin? Have you ever heard that thing? It's maybe a TV show. Somebody walks up and all kind of looking like they've been in a scuffle and says, "Oh, what happened to you?" And the person says, "You think this is bad? You should see the other guy." Right? Puff up your chest. That's what I think of when I think of the new creation. You think sin has made a mess of things? Wait till you see what the new creation does to sin. Everything we've seen that pollutes and stains and makes a mess of the beautiful thing God did that was so very good, it can either weigh you down and depress you and think, what the heck's the point? It's all a mess. Or you live in faith that what we are saying is coming and is already in process is real. The new creation is punching the face, the gut, and every other part of the sin problem because Jesus is alive. And he is in love with what he's made. Sin and all. He is not in love with sin. You don't go to the cross to take care of something that you actually like. No, you go to the cross to kill something you hate. Why does God hate sin? Because it's wrecking his beautiful world, his creation. I'm asking you to be people who live in the new creation reality to such an extent that you are amazed and enthralled that the new creation power of God is big enough, strong enough, and real enough to handle all the sin issues we've looked at. In your home, start there. If you've got a marriage that's kind of rocky, it's not real strong, it doesn't bless as much as it makes you miserable, that's a real problem for folks, even in churches. And just because you believe in the new creation reality doesn't mean it's all fixed overnight. But here's what it does. It gives you a forward momentum that this is going somewhere. This is not where we're stuck. Because I follow a risen master, and he's going to beat sin down in my home, at work, in the church, in the nation. And it may take a while, and it may not happen while I'm alive, but I know this. There is a forward trajectory. The new creation has arrived, and it will win in the end. Amen? We're not a people of giving up in despair. We're a people of hope because the promise is sure, and God always keeps his promises. He will be done with sin. And he wants to give you the world that is blessed by it. The kingdom is yours, brothers and sisters, not because you've deserved it, but because your Father loves you and you've joined his Son in the process. So let's live the new creation reality, play your part, and watch God do wonderful things along with you as your partner, the chief and senior partner, because I am hope-filled disciples of Jesus Christ.